Hello students, teachers, parents, history nerds. Hello everybody and welcome to Nutshelled History, where we lay out the facts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We continue with our Early America series by looking at the Revolutionary Era. This is the full topic, so this one is longer than the individual lessons. Check the description down below for a fill-in-the-blanks and/or multiple choice worksheet that goes along with this video. I just ask that you like and subscribe. I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. I do my best. Alright, now let's go. The French and Indian War. By the mid-1700s, Europe's biggest powers were basically in a worldwide game of capture the flag. Except instead of flags, it was land, and instead of friendly competition, it was war. In 1753, the French decided to flex their muscles and started building forts to claim the Ohio River Valley, hoping to block British expansion. The local American Indian tribes were stuck in the middle, forced to pick a side. The Algonquin and Huron teamed up with the French, while the British scored a powerful ally in the Iroquois. Virginia wasn't having it. The colony disputed France's claim and sent a young, ambitious George Washington, yes, that George Washington, to build a fort at a key spot. But surprise, the French were already there, putting the finishing touches on Fort Duquesne. Washington did manage a sneak attack, but the French weren't about to let that slide. They counterattacked with a much bigger force, forcing Washington and his troops to pack up and head home. Meanwhile, colonial delegates met in Albany, New York, where Benjamin Franklin presented his Albany Plan of Union, an idea to unite the colonies under a single council with tax collecting and army organizing powers. The Albany Congress said, "Sounds good," but the individual colonial assemblies went, no thanks, because who likes sharing power? In 1755, Britain sent General Edward Braddock to show those French who's the final boss. Small problem, Braddock had no idea how to fight in the wilderness. His troops marched loudly through the woods in their bright red uniforms, essentially yelling, "Hey, we're over here!" The French and their American Indian allies saw this as an open invitation to an ambush. Braddock and over half his men didn't make it. It was not a good look for the British. Things were looking real bad for Britain until William Pitt took charge as Prime Minister in 1757. Pitt meant business. He put better generals in charge, and just like that, the British started winning. They took Fort Louisbourg, Fort Duquesne, finally, and in a bold move, launched an attack on Quebec, the heart of New France. With a dramatic surprise attack, British General James Wolfe led 4,000 troops against the French forces under General Montcalm. The British won, sealing the fate of French rule in North America. By 1763, the war was officially over with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. France had to hand over nearly all its North American territories to Britain and Spain. And just like that, Britain was the dominant power in North America. But don't get too comfortable, the drama was far from over, growing resentment against Britain. By 1763, Britain had snagged control of most of North America east of the Mississippi River. But not everyone was thrilled, especially the American Indian nations living there. They saw British settlers creeping onto their lands and thought, "Oh no, not these guys!" Enter Pontiac, an Ottawa leader who decided enough was enough. In May 1763, he led an attack on British forts and settlements, and let's just say, it wasn't pretty. Hundreds of British were killed or tortured, and in response, Britain hit back hard. But when the American Indian nations found out the French had signed the Treaty of Paris and wouldn't be helping them, they were like, "Wait, what?" and called it quits. To prevent more chaos, Britain issued the Proclamation of 1763, banning colonial settlements west of the Appalachian Mountains. The colonists? Not happy. They had just fought a whole war for that land and were now being told, "Nope, you can't live here." Many ignored the ban completely. Meanwhile, Britain was in deep debt from the 7 Years' War, and Prime Minister George Grenville had a brilliant, terrible idea. Tax the colonies! The sugar tax slapped an import tax on goods like molasses. Colonists were not amused. Then came 1765 and the infamous Stamp Act, requiring colonists to buy tax stamps for newspapers, diplomas, and legal documents. Imagine being charged extra just for existing on paper. The colonists lost it. rioting, protesting, and declaring no taxation without representation. colonists didn't just complain, they took action. They sent a petition, a fancy way of saying, "Dear Britain, stop taxing us. Sincerely everyone," and launched a boycott of British goods. Parliament eventually repealed the Stamp Act, yay, but then immediately passed a law saying, "By the way, we can still tax you whenever we want." Sigh. Then came 1767 and the Townshend Acts, taxing everyday items like glass, paper, paint, lead, and tea. To enforce these taxes, British customs officers were given writs of assistance, fancy legal papers that let them search homes and businesses whenever they felt like it. Imagine the police just walking into your house looking for something suspicious without a warrant. Yeah, people were not okay with that. The colonists fired back with boycotts and protest groups like the Sons of Liberty and Daughters of Liberty. Some major players in the resistance? Cousins Sam and John Adams, John's wife Abigail Adams, writer Mercy Otis Warren, and George Washington and Patrick Henry down in Virginia. Things escalated fast. New York's Assembly protested the Quartering Act, because who wants to be forced to house British soldiers? So Britain dissolved the whole thing. Then in Boston, a rowdy protest turned deadly when British soldiers opened fire on the crowd, killing 5 colonists. The British called it an unfortunate event. The colonists called it the Boston Massacre. John Adams, surprisingly, defended the soldiers in court, and they got off with barely a slap on the wrist. But his cousin Samuel Adams wasn't about to let this go. He created a committee of correspondence to keep all the colonies informed about British shenanigans. Soon, other colonies followed, and just like that, they were more united with each other than with Britain. Under pressure, Parliament repealed the Townshend Acts, but one tax remained, on tea. And oh boy, that was a huge mistake. But that's a story for another day. Taking up arms. Even though most of the Townshend taxes had been scrapped, Britain just couldn't let go of its beloved tea tax. And in 1773, Parliament went full villain mode and passed the Tea Act, giving the British East India Company a monopoly on tea sales in the colonies. Translation: colonial tea merchants got totally cut out of the deal. The colonists weren't having it. On December 16, 1773, a group of protesters decided to take their boycott to the next level. Under the cover of darkness, men disguised as American Indians snuck onto 3 tea ships in Boston Harbor. Then, in a glorious act of defiance, they dumped the entire cargo into the water, because if they couldn't have tea, no one could. This legendary protest became known as the Boston Tea Party. Britain, not amused. In response, Parliament passed a series of brutal laws known as the Intolerable Acts, because, well, they were intolerable. The new laws shut down Boston's port, hello starvation, banned most town meetings, no more group chats, colonists, allowed British officials accused of crimes to be tried in Britain or Canada, where they definitely get off easy, made the Quartering Act even worse. British soldiers crashing on your couch wasn't optional now. And to top it all off, the Quebec Act blocked colonists from moving west. Instead of giving up, the colonies rallied behind Boston. Other colonies sent food, and in 1774, colonial leaders formed the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. They demanded an end to the Intolerable Acts, but Britain basically went, LOL, no. So the delegates agreed to back Massachusetts and told the colonies to start forming militias. Trouble was brewing. In and around Boston, local fighters known as Minutemen gathered weapons, sensing war was near. When British General Thomas Gage heard about a weapons stash in Concord, he decided to send troops to seize it. On April 18, 1775, British soldiers snuck across the Charles River and began marching. Bad news for them, the Sons of Liberty were watching. Paul Revere and other riders spread the alarm, waking up the countryside. When the British reached Lexington, they found a small band of Minutemen waiting. Someone, still debated today, fired the first shot of the American Revolution. 8 colonists fell, and the British pushed on to Concord, only to find nothing. But the real fun started on their way back. A larger force of Minutemen ambushed them, forcing the British to retreat all the way back to Boston. So much for an easy mission. Meanwhile, in July 1775, the Second Continental Congress sent King George III an olive branch petition, basically saying, "Hey, we're still loyal to you, just maybe cool it with the taxes and harsh laws." King George, enraged. Instead of making peace, he sent 20,000 more troops to the colonies. Yikes. At the same time, Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys pulled off an epic sneak attack on Fort Ticonderoga, capturing valuable cannons. Meanwhile, the Continental Congress put together an official army and appointed a guy named George Washington to lead it. Spoiler alert, he does pretty well. But not everyone was on board. The colonies were divided. Patriots, about 1/3, were all in for war against Britain. Loyalists, another 1/3, stayed loyal to King George, mostly in the middle colonies in the south. The last 1/3, they just wanted everyone to chill. The British Army may have been better trained and better equipped, but the Patriots had one major advantage. They weren't fighting 3,000 miles from home. And with that, the road to revolution had officially begun. The move toward independence. By June 1775, Boston was basically a British military campground, with 6,000 redcoats lounging around. Meanwhile, the colonial militia had taken up position on Breed's Hill, overlooking the city and harbor, with more troops chilling nearby on Bunker Hill. The British, being British, decided a full frontal attack was the way to go. Enter General William Howe, who thought storming straight up the hill was a great idea. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. First attempt? Nope, redcoats got wrecked. Second attempt? Still nope. Even more redcoats down. Third attempt? Finally, but only because the Americans ran out of ammo. When the dust settled, 1,000 British soldiers were dead or wounded, compared to 400 Americans. Sure, the British technically won the Battle of Bunker Hill, but the Americans proved they weren't just a bunch of farmers with pitchforks. They could fight. Washington arrives, and the British leave town. When George Washington showed up, he found 16,000 British troops hanging out in Boston. He had his work cut out for him. His army was more of a disorganized mob than a fighting force. But lucky for him, Ethan Allen's stolen cannons arrived just in time. Washington had the big guns set up overlooking Boston, and the British commander took one look and went, "Nope, we're out of here." In March 1776, the British and 1,000 loyalists sailed off to Canada. Bye-bye Boston, common sense and the Declaration of Independence. At the start of 1776, most colonists were still like, independence? Meh. But then came Thomas Paine with his pamphlet, Common Sense. Paine's message, you don't owe Britain anything. They only helped us when it benefited them. Ditch the king. The result, 500,000 copies sold in 6 months. Basically, it went viral in 18th century terms. Public opinion flipped. By June 1776, Richard Henry Lee stood up in Congress and said, "Let's make this breakup official." After much debate, a committee was formed to draft the ultimate Dear John letter to King George III. They picked Thomas Jefferson to write it. On July 4, 1776, Congress approved the Declaration of Independence. From that moment, the Patriots weren't just in rebellion, they were fighting for an independent nation. The Declaration had 3 parts. 1. Preamble. Here's why we're writing this. 2. List of grievances. King George is the worst. Look at all the awful stuff he did. And 3. Conclusion. We're done. We're calling ourselves the United States of America now. Deal with it. Independence? Declared. Winning it? Not so easy. Washington's retreat and a Christmas miracle. The British Army, led by General Howe, was way bigger and way better trained than Washington's ragtag crew. After suffering a series of defeats, Washington's army was pushed all the way from New York to Pennsylvania. Things were not looking good. Then, on the night of December 25, 1776, Washington pulled off an epic Christmas surprise. Crossing the icy Delaware River, he and his men snuck into Trenton, New Jersey, where a bunch of German Hessian soldiers were fast asleep. Surprise attack. The Americans captured most of the Hessians before they even had a chance to fight back. British forces tried to retake Trenton, but Washington's troops managed to escape. Morale restored. The turning point, Saratoga. The British thought they could cut off New England from the rest of the colonies by taking control of key supply routes. Their plan? 3 armies would meet in Albany to crush the rebellion. Problem? Only one army actually made it. General Burgoyne showed up, but the other 2 never arrived. Burgoyne did manage to recapture Fort Ticonderoga, but soon after, he got completely surrounded by American troops at Saratoga. Out of options, Burgoyne surrendered his entire army. Huge win for the Americans. Even better, France took notice. They saw the Patriots actually had a shot at winning this thing, so they decided to help. Saratoga changed everything. Now, the war wasn't just the colonies versus Britain, it was Britain versus the colonies, France, and eventually Spain too. With some powerful new allies, the Patriots finally had a real chance at victory, winning independence. As the Patriots were picking fights with Britain, other European countries decided to jump in on the action. France was already on board, and then Spain got involved too. The governor of Spanish Louisiana had been sneaking supplies to the Americans. When Spain officially entered the war, he took action, seizing British forts and kicking the Brits out of West Florida. Meanwhile, some international rock stars joined the Continental Army. Marquis de Lafayette, French flair, anyone? Friedrich von Steuben, German precision. Thaddeus Kosciuszko and Casimir Pulaski, Polish power. These guys brought some serious expertise to the Continental Army. The Winter of Discontent. Fast forward to 1777-1778, and Washington's army was hunkered down at Valley Forge, fighting the cold and lack of everything. Food? X. Clothing? Nope. Medicine? Not. Basically, it was the worst winter campout ever. Despite the miserable conditions, the troops toughened up and sharpened their skills. What doesn't kill you makes you better at battle. Women, African Americans, and Native Americans step up. While the men were fighting, the women were stepping in, showing the world that the war effort was a team sport. Some took on traditional roles like nurses, cooks, and laundry helpers, while others literally fought. Girl power, indeed. At first, the Continental Congress wasn't too keen on letting African Americans, free or enslaved, join the army. But when the British promised freedom to enslaved people who fought for them, Washington was like, okay, fine, we'll let them join too. About 5,000 African Americans signed up for the American Army, with 2,000 more in the Navy. Many believed that victory for the Patriots would mean an end to slavery. American Indians were also involved. The British convinced them that a Patriot win would mean more white settlers on their land. As a result, many attacked American settlements, while others, like the Miami, decided to team up with the Patriots. Naval battles and Benedict Arnold's big betrayal. The British Navy was tough, blockading American ports like a pro. But the tiny American Navy had a moment of glory when John Paul Jones, a guy who clearly wasn't afraid of anyone, captured a mighty British warship in the North Sea. Boom. In the South, British General Clinton was counting on loyalists to back him up. But after some brutal British tactics, the Patriots gained more support. New tactics and local knowledge helped the Patriots turn the tables, resulting in major losses for the British. Benedict Arnold, the ultimate plot twist. Then came Benedict Arnold, the Patriot general who got mad about not getting enough credit for his victories. So he flipped, handed over West Point to the British, and then led British campaigns. The Americans tried to catch him, but he was like a slippery fish, never caught. The final victory, Yorktown. Fast forward to 1781, Washington, with some French backup, trapped General Cornwallis at Yorktown. Surrounded and with nowhere to go, Cornwallis had no choice but to surrender. This marked the end of the war, as Britain was ready to throw in the towel. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783, sealed the deal. America was officially independent. Victory. The Patriots pulled it off. Let's celebrate with the recap. By the mid-1700s, European powers were in fierce competition for land, with France and Britain vying for control over North America. Tensions escalated when France built forts in the Ohio River Valley, prompting George Washington's failed attempt to establish a fort of his own. After a series of defeats and a surprise attack by British General Braddock, Britain turned the tide with William Pitt's leadership, eventually winning key battles like Quebec. The Treaty of Paris in 1763 shifted control of much of North America to Britain, but the colonists grew resentful of British taxes and policies that were put in place to pay for the war, considering they benefited. As protests like the Boston Tea Party and the Intolerable Acts increased tensions, the colonies began forming militias, leading to the first shots of the Revolution. Despite setbacks, including winter hardships and internal divisions, the Americans secured crucial victories at Saratoga and Trenton, gaining foreign allies like France and Spain. The war ended in 1781 with the British surrender at Yorktown, and the Treaty of Paris in 1783 recognized American independence. There you have it, folks. That is the Revolutionary Era nutshelled. Thanks for stopping by Nutshelled History. Please enjoy the Nutshelled Revolution by going nuts on those like and subscribe buttons for me. Okay, I'll see y'all next time on Nutshelled History.